All right, so I was sitting at home on, I think, Sunday afternoon, being lazy, doing nothing, wasting time, scrolling through my phone, and I saw a post on Instagram by Ariel Helwani. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to watch this, as you do, a 10-minute long video. I had a watch, and during this video, Ariel Helwani announced to us, his audience, that he has decided to move on from ESPN. And to be honest with you, I was shocked. I was surprised. I was gobsmacked that Ariel Helwani had taken this decision, and he did make it clear in the video that this was 100% my call. This was my decision, and I did think that there must be a reason behind this. And the reason why I thought that, well, there's two reasons why I thought that. Firstly, I really personally enjoyed the content that he was creating working for ESPN. Like, I watched the reboot of the MMA Hour, which then became the Ariel Helwani Show on a weekly basis. And then that turned into the DC and Helwani Show, and I watched that on a weekly basis. I watched it just yesterday. All right. I watch all of the interviews. Not sorry, I'm going to rephrase. I don't watch all of the interviews. The interviews that he does with the 3 or 4 personalities on a weekly basis, I tend to watch majority of them. Usually it's a personality within the sport. Sometimes it's a personality outside of the sport. If I'm interested in the person, I'll watch the interview. So I felt like ESPN would be happy with the content that he's creating on their network. I don't know whether that's the right word. And the other reason why I found it a bit strange is the fact that Ariel Helwani, when he joined ESPN, he spoke about how this has always been a dream of his to work for ESPN, and how this is the broadcaster that he really looked up to growing up, and he really aspired to one day be part of the ESPN team. It was a dream of his, and he managed to realize that dream. So I felt like ESPN probably hold a sentimental place in his heart. ESPN are happy with Ariel Helwani, so why are they parting ways? And then out of nowhere, like an RKO, today I get a notification on my phone for an article on the New York Post, and I found that a little bit strange because I've never read the New York Post. I've never searched for the New York Post, but because Ariel Helwani is the subject of this article, I have a feeling my phone decided it needed to let me know that this article exists. And it's from a guy called Andrew Marchand, who, again, I've never heard of. I don't know whether he's a sports journalist, an MMA journalist, or just a business journalist. But according to Andrew Marchand, he says that ESPN did in fact offer Ariel Helwani a new deal, but that new deal comes with the privilege of taking a pay cut. So first, they offered him a 10% pay cut and then a 5% pay cut. Now, I'm not here to watch anyone's pockets. I don't really care how much or how little Ariel Helwani earns. That's not really the subject or that's not really the main point of all of this for me personally. Because I understand the current predicament that the world's in. And I understand the effects that this last year and a half has had on big global businesses such as ESPN. And I understand that their purse strings might be a little bit tighter now than they once were, which means that they're not able to offer Ariel Helwani the kind of package that he might have been expecting. So the fact that this might be the reason why he's leaving ESPN, that's kind of by the by for me, if I'm honest with you. What I'm more interested in is ESPN as an entity, and the kind of content they produce for MMA, and more importantly for ESPN, the UFC, being the fact that UFC, the home of the UFC is ESPN, right? So first and foremost, if you remove Ariel Helwani from the equation for ESPN, in terms of content that they produce independent of the UFC, it leaves them with next to nothing, really. I know Brett Okamoto does interviews every now and again with different people within the sport, and often with Dana White. But aside from that, I can't really think of much else that ESPN do that doesn't involve Ariel Helwani. I'm a big fan of the post-fight show that Ariel Helwani is always one of the guests on. I'm a big fan of the pre-fight show that you sometimes see Ariel Helwani do with different people. A lot of the time it's with Chael Sonnen. I always watch those kind of long-form interviews that Ariel Helwani does on Fight Week with, big headline fighters, the Conor McGregors of this world, John Jones, Israel Adesanya, Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier. I've always enjoyed that content, and without Ariel Helwani, I don't know who ESPN or how ESPN are going to be creating content to accompany the UFC coverage independent of the UFC, and I don't even know whether that's a priority for him. You'd think it would be, because I can't think of any major broadcaster that has the rights to a major sports franchise that don't create content to sit around the sport itself. Do you know what I mean? So Sky Sports over here in the UK, they got the rights to Premier League football, but the amount of content they produce independent of just the coverage of the football itself, it's hours a week when we're in season. Do you know what I mean? So it leaves ESPN scarce the content moving forward once Ariel Helwani leaves next week. So I'd be interested to see what they do to fill that void, or whether they're even going to bother trying to fill that void. The thing that's kind of the most interesting for me personally is, what does Ariel Helwani do now? Because when I first started following his content, which would have been 10, 15, I can't put an exact date on it, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it was based on interviewing fighters. That's what he did, right? And that meant going to events, being at every single event, media day, fight on the day of the fight, interviewing fighters after fights and stuff like that. You all know what he was doing back in the day, right? And then obviously interviewing fighters throughout the week, remotely, or whether it's in person in studio. Now, that's changed, and I feel like that's not a choice that Ariel Helwani has made, but it's more because of the circumstances of the world and how people have had to work remotely, myself included, over the last year and a half. But that's allowed him to create this show with DC, and during, whilst he's been making this show with DC, it's allowed him to just express his opinion more. And he's less reliant on having to secure guests to interview. With that now being the case, and the fact that he hasn't attended an event for the last year or so, or whatever it's been, I feel like Ariel Helwani is less reliant on having to maintain relationships with different personalities, people, stakeholders within the sport, which has allowed him to be more free with expressing his opinions, because he's less worried about annoying different people. And we all know that, that's happened in the past, and I'm not saying that people are justified in being annoyed by Ariel Helwani. I've spoken about this before. Like, we all know what's happened with Ali Abdelaziz, and from my point of view, I don't really think it's the right call for Ali Abdelaziz to bar all of his fighters from talking to Ariel Helwani, because he's got a personal gripe with him. But it is what it is. Personally, I would like to see Ariel Helwani go a bit renegade, to be honest. I feel like he's now in a position where he's detached enough from the sport where, like I said, he doesn't need to maintain these relationships with different stakeholders in the sport. But at the same time, he still is the biggest name when it comes to people that cover the sport, whether you want to call him a reporter, a journalist, whatever name you want to call him. He's still the biggest guy out there. He's still got the biggest following in the sport when it comes to journalists or reporters in MMA, and he's still got the biggest social media presence. It's quite funny because I just happened to see, it came on my feed on YouTube yesterday, a live YouTube thing that Ariel Helwani did a week ago on his personal channel, and he hadn't used it for God knows how many years, and that must have been around the time where it was decided that he's not going to be extending with ESPN. So if he's just going to focus on using his own brand moving forward and just going down the route of independent podcasters and things of that nature, I'd be quite interested to see how that pans out. I feel like there's a lot of people out there now that are doing interviews with fighters, and a lot of the time these interviews with fighters, they're not really giving us as fans a lot of information or revealing something that we didn't know already. But what I do enjoy is listening to different journalists, reporters, whatever you want to call them, in the sport express their opinions. I watch Morning Combat 3 times or 4 times a week, however often they're on. I used to listen to Man and the Myth before that stopped last week with Chuck Minahan and Sean Ashati, and I'd be interested to see what Ariel Helwani does moving forward. I know a lot of people don't like Ariel Helwani. I don't really have that opinion. Like I said, I'm a big fan of him. I'm a big fan of his work, so I'll be following whatever he does next. But it's interesting times. I feel like this is quite a big deal when it comes to the sport, just because of the knock-on effect for ESPN, and it'll just be good to see what he does next. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Put your comments below. Don't be scared to hit the like button. If you've enjoyed this video, share it with a friend. Again, if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys next time.